How did that one kid at your school pass away? Story 1. He came into school one day with flu-like symptoms, and no one thought too much about it. By the time it was end of day, he started having some cognitive impairment. By the time they took him to the hospital, it was too late, and he later died from encephalitis. Story 2. One boy in my year got hit by a bus while running across the road after school. He died in hospital a week later. Another boy got home from school, stated that he wasn't feeling well, and went to take nap. His parents checked on him in the evening and decided to let him sleep it off. They tried to wake him up for school the next morning, and he had died in his sleep. It turned out he had meningitis. Pretty identical to my story, but this was a year or two after high school. Was at my girlfriend's dorm. Her roommate said she had a headache and she was gonna go to bed early. I can still see and hear her saying that, as if it were yesterday. It was nothing, she just didn't feel well, just another headache. I went home, and around midnight my girlfriend called me. Roommate was literally screaming in pain, so she took her to the ER where she died within a few hours. Meningitis. Story 3. Had a brain tumor, so started a fundraiser by running a marathon with his bald head, crazy guy. Raised $80,000 for cancer treatment of others since he wasn't going to survive anyway. He told people to not donate cash because he liked gambling too much, but since he was a funny guy, people were like, screw it, do it. So he did, turned around $300 into $4,000 and told everyone he'd rather have some more luck with health. He bought his first car with that $4,000. He was gonna give it to his brother. I think someone was listening when he asked for more luck with his health, because the treatment turned out to be successful and he survived cancer. There was pretty much a 0% chance, but doctors said it probably had something to do with him training for/running the marathon. He crashed his first car 3 months later coming home after losing $300 at the casino and didn't survive. Story 4. School had recently made a rule where food could not be taken out of the cafeteria. He stuffed the entire cheeseburger into his mouth and started walking out into the halls. Made it about 30 feet before falling over. Big guy, the only person who could even attempt the Heimlich maneuver was the weightlifting coach. Wasn't enough. Sad stuff. Story 5. He was asleep in the back seat of the car with his parents in the front on their way back from holiday when they got into an accident and he was launched through the front windscreen onto the street. He was 9 or 10, I think, in the year above me. I didn't know him, but I could put a face to the name. The school made sure we all knew what had happened. Wear your seatbelts, kids. The parents weren't seriously hurt in the crash. Not physically, anyway. I can't imagine what a toll that must take. He was their only child. He wouldn't have had the entire back seats to himself to lie down on otherwise. Story 6. Her house burned down. Her second and third youngest brother died as well, leaving just the eldest brother and her single mom. It was the kind of neighborhood that, at first, people thought was arson from a rival gang. Turned out to be some faulty wiring. I was in grade 5. She was kind, precocious, and incredibly popular in the neighborhood, due in part to her family's generosity around Christmas. This was a coming-of-age moment for me. Nothing was the same after this, and not for reasons related to her passing, but it did prepare me for the fact that chaos does not make value judgments when deciding whose life should take a tragic turn. Story 7. We had 2 while I was at school. One got a job during the summer holidays as a cleaner. He was operating a floor polisher and it was shorting to the metal casing. He was electrocuted and died. Another had failed his mock exams just before his family were due to go away on holiday, so they left him at home and told him he should spend the time revising for a retake after the summer. They found him hanging in the garage after a week of them being abroad having a great holiday. As a father myself now, I've learned that if my kids fail or do less well than expected, I won't ever take it out on them or punish them, but give them a lot of close support and let them know whatever happens they will be okay. Story 8. This happened when I was in 6th grade and the kid was, I think, in 4th grade. We never talked to each other, frankly. I never even noticed him. One day, according to many rumors, the kid went to a river with his family. All was well when suddenly he started to drown. Not just him, but a few children too. When the adult noticed him drowning, they rushed to hit aids, and unfortunately, it was too late. I don't know what happened to the other children playing in the river with him. When the news spread around the school, the teacher decided to do a PSA talking about the safety and precautions of playing in the water. At the end, the principal came up and wanted us to pray for the kid who drowned to go to heaven and their grieving family for their lost. I don't really know the aftermath or how the kid's family is doing, but I hope they are doing well. Story 9. When I was in school, 3 kids died within 18 months. It was terrible. My town has maybe 1,200 people, so 3 kids dying is a lot. One girl at a party had a massive freak out from nowhere and had a brain aneurysm. The bleeding had started putting pressure in her head, which sent her manic. When they got the door open, she was already passed. She was 17. One guy had an undiagnosed brain tumor that eliminated him in his sleep, just never woke up. One day he was 14. And the last was at my old school, small rural town in Australia, so everyone knew everyone, was getting off the bus on a rainy day to cross the road to her mom's car and was hit by another car. She was 15. Story 10. A senior in high school died of cancer just after graduation. He was the most popular kid in his classes. It was pancreatic cancer, so it just happened. Genuinely shocked the entire school. He was a very liked guy. His girlfriend at the time was in my high school class, and she was devastated, leaned on the addict as a coping mechanism, and became a meth addict. She died 2 years after him. It was brutal. Story 11. A kid in our HS was in a boating accident with another boat at night. Both the kid from my school and the 40-something-year-old guy he hit passed away too. It was all over the news that the 17-year-old from my school was getting painted as some reckless kid. A few weeks later, the actual findings and toxicology results came out. The older guy had a ton of alcohol in his system, was an inexperienced boater, and parked with his lights out. My classmate grew up and worked in the marina, so he knew what he was doing. This was not in the front pages, which angered a lot of us that he was originally put in such a bad light due to his age. Story 12. He was crossing an interstreet that went between an apartment complex and its facilities. The road itself was for residents to drive in and out of the complex, and service needs for the entire complex. On one particular evening, a water transport truck was driving out of the complex, and I can only presume it was too dark or that the driver just didn't notice an 8-year-old fall over right in front of the truck, and he kept driving. The front wheel crushed his head. The next couple of years were hard. He was the nicest kid I knew, the only one that had been kind to me that school year. I hope his family has found peace. Story 13. Let's call him G, a really cheerful guy who seemed to get along with everyone. Literally no one had anything bad to say about him. We were in the middle of our 12th board exams. He was in the science stream, and I was in commerce. It all happened just a few days after my mom passed away during my exams. One afternoon, after he came back from attending his paper, G was having lunch with his parents. While chewing, he suddenly sneezed and, trying not to spill his food, he held it back. In that moment, he collapsed, falling from his chair. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. I still can't wrap my head around a death like that. Story 14. Alfred. He was an avid mountain/BMX biker. Always wore his helmet and was a steward of the sport for the younger kids at the skate park. Got a new bike on his 18th birthday and took it for a sesh at the park. It was in June, so it was getting warmer. Across the street from the skate park was the mall, with huge parking lots. He was coasting through the parking lot, chilling on his way home. Helmet hanging from his handlebars as he cooled down. He was hit by a car backing out of a parking space, fell, hit the back of his head, and died in hospital a few hours later. He was in grade 12, graduating, and set to go off to college for aircraft maintenance. We were in a percussion ensemble together, and the dude was a great drummer and great mentor to the younger guys. 100% a real one. Story 15. Freshman year of high school, only 3 weeks, and one of the girls in my drama class decided to go out partying with a bunch of older classmen at a different school. They all got drunk and one of the boys drove directly into a tree at full speed. The upperclassmen all lived, as they had their seatbelts on. She wasn't wearing hers and was ejected through the front seat, breaking every bone in her body. I still think about her decades later. Wear your seatbelt. What happened to the smartest kid in your class? Story 1. The smartest in my class were twins. Would get perfect or almost perfect grades in every subject. Like 100% in almost every test or assignment, whether it's a math test or history paper. Did a ton of volunteer hours too. They both got accepted into Cambridge University's MED program. I think only 5 or 10 applicants got accepted from all of Canada. One's a neurosurgeon and the other a cardiologist now. Story 2. The smartest kid in my school was really popular and was one of my closest friends. But when he graduated, he left everyone and everything behind, including his family. He even changed his name. I found out this little bit of information because a friend went to an academic conference and showed me a group photo and he was in it. I exclaimed, "That's my friend Pascal." He kept his first name, but his last name was an anagram of his original name. Story 3. Dropped out of college to marry and support the much younger woman he got pregnant. Now, 30 years later, owns a board game store with a large back room for mini painting and games and plays dad to half the neurodivergent kids in town. Still married to the same woman too. It's not a high-flying life, but he makes a difference to so many people. Edit, wow, this blew up. To make y'all feel better, he was 23, I think, and she was 18, a big age gap when you're young. It was also in the Netherlands, where at least at the time, I've been gone a while, we didn't really care so much as long as it wasn't a 10-year difference or one of them was under 15. It happens. Story 4. Had a full ride through Berkeley. Ended up experimenting a lot with hallucinogens. Started to believe he was a star child or starseed and was from another planet. Ended up starving himself in a national park to die with the Earth so he could meet other star children. Miss and love you, buddy. Edit, it has come to my attention there is a Berkeley and a Berkeley. He was the smartest kid, not me, lol. So I'm updating this to add the correct college. Story 5. When I was in middle school, we had a super smart kid join later on in the semester that was always teased because he was above everyone else mentally. I think in 8th grade he was doing 10th or 11th grade mathematics. Any test that he took he passed with flying colors, hardly even studying. He befriended me. I was kinda quiet in middle school because of stuff going on at home. His mom always made me an extra sandwich whenever she made his lunch. I lost contact after graduation, but a few years later when I was a sophomore in college, I decided to look him up on Facebook and couldn't believe what I saw. There was my friend the Brainiac smoking salvia out of a huge bong as his profile picture. I think he had to take it down because when I looked him up again, he had pics of him drinking out of a funnel. Story 6. Passed away in a car accident sophomore year. I loved her. First person I felt those feelings for. I could remember the first time I saw her in kindergarten. We also learned to golf together my freshman year. It was tragic because she had so much potential and died overachieving trying to get to school early for jazz band practice. It was snowing and school hadn't been delayed or canceled yet, as our superintendent liked to always wait until the last minute. She hit a slick spot and collided with a semi. Story 7. From one school, he was razzied, not quite bullied, because he wanted to be a truck driver. He later graduated as valedictorian from our local VocTech school, got an associate's degree in diesel mechanics, did that for a few years, and later went back to the community college and has taught it since the late 1980s. He would have been a drastic failure as, say, a doctor or a lawyer. From another school, she and her husband are probably sovereign citizens. I sure wish I was making that up. Story 8. She got a PhD in neuroscience from Stanford, and I think she's a professor or associate professor somewhere now. She was possibly the sweetest girl I'd ever met. I was an intelligent underachiever and ended up in a few AP courses with her because our teachers saw my test scores and refused to continue to let me do crap things with my crap friends. She was always super proud of me when I actually showed up and put some effort in and, lo and behold, got excellent marks. Honestly, she really turned around the last 2 years of HS for me. Also, she's wicked hot now. A hot genius. Story 9. Went to college for mathematics as one of the most promising young minds in the Midwest. Was in college for a year before switching to study Spanish. Dropped out a year later. Currently works at GameStop 20 minutes from his parents' house, where he lives. He was a good friend of mine, but I recently learned that he considered me his best friend. It's such a shame that his intelligence is going to waste. He is literally so smart and has such a talent for math, but he seems content with his life. Who am I to judge? Story 10. I was top 5% of my class, went to an Ivy League and was set to go to medical school, but the more I shadowed MDs, the more I realized what a scam medicine was. In terms of residency being slavery / amount of debt I'd have to go into / the sheer numbers of hours per week I'd put in as an MD, and went to get a master's in nursing instead. Now both me and Miso are travel nurses and work 6 months out of the year and travel the country / world the other half. I spent last summer in Alaska, this summer in Montana, and basically my life is amazing. The smartest thing I ever did was drop out of the rat race. Story 11. That was me. Dux, or valedictorian, of my high school. Voted brainiest by my peers for the school yearbook. Highest university entrance grades of my school. Quintessential nerd. I went into chemical engineering because that was the degree brainy kids did. I was okay at the job, but never great. Bounced around across 5 different manufacturing companies, mostly in entry-level positions or close to it. Has some mild successes, got a few promotions. Got made redundant a lot. Finally secured a management position after 10 years. And realized I absolutely hated every aspect of the job. Did a lot of soul searching. It really was a massive shock to my system that I had failed at something that was meant to be for the smart people. Took a lot for me to redefine my identity without being smart at the heart of it. These days, I teach chemistry at the local high school. I absolutely love it. Kind of regret that I turned my nose up for years because I was too smart to be a teacher. But I can't change the past, so all that's left to do is learn from it. Story 12. All the pressure made me have a mental breakdown in college. I was diagnosed with many illnesses mentally. Finished my first round with a 3.98. Got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Messed my body and memory so bad I had to quit my job working at our doctor's office. Developed severe myofascial pelvic pain syndrome. I lost everything, including my husband. He cheated and left because not working made me not part of the team. I wish I put more effort into experiences rather than education, as now I'm disabled and it all feels pointless and worthless as I'm in debt I can't work out of. Story 13. He got someone pregnant right out of his. So he decided to not go to the Ivy League school he had a full scholarship to and stay home to be a dad. He got his associates at the local community college and is now a science teacher at the same high school he graduated from. I talk to him every once in a while when I'm down there to visit my parents. He's always asking about my job because he wanted to be a software engineer when he graduated high school, and the community college didn't even have regular computer classes, so he settled for some environmental science degree. Story 14. I got a full ride to a top 10 public university, so I'd say I'm doing pretty good. I'm not good in social situations. People say I come across as arrogant crap. They don't say that when I'm helping their trivia team win or teaching them how to do their homework. I got diagnosed with ADHD, which explains why my brain was always a little different. Being smart is a little isolating. You grow up thinking you know a lot, and you do, but you don't realize until you're older that what you know is useless. I'm trying to learn how to socialize and make jokes, but it's a slow process. It's hard to learn when you get older. For young people reading this thread, get better now. It'll be so much easier than waiting until you're an adult. Story 15. His brain figuratively fell to bits between secondary school and sixth form, which is like the last 2 years of high school in the US for reference, and he wound up with a mediocre degree and never really made a career for himself. Then 20 years later got diagnosed with autism, and now all the trouble I've had making friends and dealing with transitions between learning environments makes so much sense. Wish I'd known back then, to an extent, but what would it have changed? Doubt I'd have been given much support back in 2001. And now I have a steady and enriching, if stressful, job, a partner whom I love with my entire self, and I'm not stuck paying hideous rents because we managed to get a mortgage before COVID hit. Genuinely cannot complain for the moment. Teachers, what's the worst thing a kid brought for show and tell? Story 1. In 5th grade, we were studying human anatomy. When we got to the eyes, a kid brought in a bag full of cow's eyes. His dad worked in a slaughterhouse. Teacher was horrified. Edit, I should add that my classmate brought them in unannounced. The teacher had no plans for dissection and was going to show us a film strip about eyes or something. I should add that the teacher put them in the staff refrigerator for the day. This was in the Arizona heat. Afterwards, when the teacher returned the bag of eyes to my classmate, he took them home. And on the walk home, gave them out to any kid who wanted one. I'll leave all that to your imagination. Story 2. Wasn't show and tell, but once during morning break while I was a student teacher, 2 6-year-olds came to find the class teacher in the staff room. They had something to show her. She came back with pictures. These boys had found half a dead and decomposed hedgehog and decided to pick it up and put it on her desk. Needless to say, hands were thoroughly washed and drenched in sanitizer. Story 3. I taught 5th grade in a school with really rich kids and really low-income kids bust in. One of the low-income kids brought a coconut for her show and tell about Trinidad, where her dad was from. She cracked it open. It was completely rotten inside and smelled awful. I was so worried about the kid being embarrassed, but then one of the rich kids, who was also of a pretty low intellect, looked at it with wide eyes and said, "It's like the earth, the core, the mantle, and the crust." Which is something I think he had never really understood before. So it actually turned out pretty well. Story 4. When I was in 6th grade, I took a belly dancing burlesque thing in that my brother sent me from his deployment. We were studying the Middle East and I had something from there. I thought it was cool. I remember my teacher gulping, eyes bulging, asking, "Just that? That's all they wear?" And me saying, "Yeah, I guess so." Anyways, it turns out he sent me his girlfriend's present and his girlfriend got my camel book. But I was very, very popular with the 6th grade boys for a little while. Story 5. When I was in 5th grade and going to school in AZ, this girl in our class brought in a glass jar with a tarantula and a black widow. No clue how she caught both in one day, or why. Within an hour, the tarantula was dead and upside down in the jar. Same day there was a fire drill and yep, someone knocked it off her desk and the jar broke, releasing the black widow. We never found it, but the teacher made sure to stomp the dead tarantula just in case. Same thing happened with our glass fire ant farm in 2nd grade, now that I think about it. I don't know why people kept bringing this crap into school, or why our teachers let them. Story 6. Had a kid aged 6 to 7 who had a lot going on, but part of it was that he was a compulsive liar with absolutely no sense of when a lie was so poorly constructed that everyone would know. Every single day he would say he had something for show and tell. Most days we didn't have time for his show and tell, but every so often we kind of had to let him have a go. He'd stand up, ready to do his show and tell, then wander over to my desk, browse for a minute, pick up the most random crap, a post-it note, a sharpener. Once it was the custom well-done stamp that actually had my name on it, and then say some poorly constructed story about how he found it in Africa when he went there for tea yesterday with his auntie or some such. He'd get really upset if he realized nobody believed him, though even at that age, most of the kids had the tact, or gullibility, to just smile and nod. Story 7. Not a teacher, but when I was in 5th grade, my friend brought a metal hip replacement piece from a human body. A human body that her father had cremated and kept. It was for "What would you like to be when you grow up?" sort of show and tell. She wanted to be a mortician like her dad. What's worse is that she allowed for this piece to be passed around the class before telling everyone, including the teacher, what it was. Chaos ensued afterwards. Story 8. Not a teacher, but I did this one. I brought a switchblade comb. Pulled it out and opened it. Teacher panicked and almost passed out and started hyperventilating. I ran into her in my young adult life, and she still remembered because it actually put her into labor. This was 3rd grade, about 1987 to 88. Story 9. A teacher once made me the subject of a show and tell. My parents, for reasons understood only by them, thought it'd be a great idea to get raw, still in the husk black walnuts by the bushel. Taking the husks off resulted in all of us getting our hands dyed a nice, deep walnut brown color. I guess it never occurred to anyone to wear gloves until it was too late. Ocelot, show the class your hands and tell them all why they look that way. So humiliating to walk around with what looked like dirty hands and black fingernails for a week. Story 10. My dad had a great show and tell story. He caught a big gardener snake. It was about 3 feet long from his telling, and was telling all his friends at school about it. The teacher told him to stop lying, and he told her he wasn't lying. She then said, "Fine, bring it in." My dad packed up this gardener snake in a big old jar, but broke it on the way to school. He walks into class with this big snake in his hands. The teacher freaks out, jumps on her desk, and is terrified of it. She sends him to the principal's office. The principal was also a woman who wouldn't let him in cause he was holding a big gardener snake. The principal called his mother, who simply responded with, "Why did the teacher want him to bring it in then?" He ended up getting the day off school and didn't get in any other trouble from it. Story 11. My mom was a teacher. I didn't live with her, but I would occasionally go help her move stuff around, hang stuff up, clean. Just help with her room. Occasionally, I'd bring a friend or two. We were in high school. My sister, 6, attended the school that our mother taught at. One day my mom called and asked if I'd come by with the 2 friends that I usually brought. We showed up about 20 minutes later. Without explaining, my mother sent us to my sister's room. We knocked, walked in, and my sister yelled, "My show and tell is here. These are my brothers. They are funny. I am so lucky to be friends with these 2 guys to this day." Without hesitation, they started an age-appropriate Three Stooges routine. One climbed onto the other's shoulders. They juggled school supplies, pretended to trip each other, made funny noises. I barely played a role. My sister's class was continuous roar of laughter. Even the teacher was crying. She asked us to stop or leave because she didn't want kids passing out from laughing. I'll never forget my sister's little face, looking so proud, haha. Sorry for straying the prompt. But that's the only show and tell I can remember. Story 12. Not the worst, but coolest. A student of mine brought in a taxidermied, stuffed bear from the shoulders up that his dad had eliminated with a bow. Best part was that his parents didn't know he brought it, so he snuck it to school in a huge black garbage bag. A couple years later, he brought homing pigeons that he and his dad are raising and training, and did a whole presentation with a headset mic and everything for the school. The whole family is full of the nicest and coolest people I've ever met. Easily one of my top 3 favorite families of all time. Story 13. Not a teacher, but I remember a kid bringing in his hamsters. They were in a cage with tubes. I think there was like 4 in there. He got up and talked about how he liked hamsters and that he's had a bunch of them. He then proceeded to take one out, tell us its name, and out of nowhere he says, "Oh, and check this out." Then he held the hamster above his head for all to see and squished him. Story 14. A school bag full of his own hair. To be fair, he didn't actually try to show and tell it. He also brought in an action man. I noticed him and his best friend playing with the action man. They were putting something on its head. I went over to him and asked him what it was. "It's hair." Hair? Where did it come from? It's Stevie's hair. He got it cut at the weekend. The child had a haircut, brought the clippings home, then put them in his school bag and brought them into school. That hair stayed in his school bag for a full week before his mother noticed. Story 15. Not a teacher, but when I was about 8 or 9, I brought a pill case containing mouse organs preserved in olive oil. Monday was the heart, Tuesday the liver, you get the idea. My cat had caught and killed the mouse. I confiscated it, and then our exchange student and I dissected it on the back porch. I swear neither of our are serial killers. We were both aspiring doctors/surgeons, and so thought it was super cool. My teacher did not agree, and my parents definitely got a call home. The happy end of the story is that our exchange student is now a cardiothoracic surgeon, so the mouse's sacrifice was not in vain. What is the weirdest thing that the weird kid did at school? Story 1. Called a quadriplegic substitute teacher man on wheels, stormed out of the classroom and disappeared. The school thought he tried to walk home, so they started searching everywhere only to have him pop out of his own locker at the end of the day. Story 2. This was primary school. We would have been around 10 years old. There was an attempt to bring special needs kids in and integrate them into our classes. One guy was just so odd, it wasn't going well. One morning recess, we're out playing on the swings and monkey bars, and a girl screams. We run over, and the special needs guy has blood running down from where his ear used to be. He's also dragging an open cardboard egg container, the ones we used to cut up for crafts, behind him tied to a piece of string. In that container is the missing piece of his ear. He'd cut it off with scissors. That's how the special needs integration program ended. Story 3. I was in a Star Wars RPG club where we spent lunch geeking out. There was one kid who played a few times, but he spent most of the time wandering from table to table. He would ask, "How are your parents? And what are you doing when you're done with school?" He was clearly special needs, and we cut him some slack as he looked like he needed a friend. But he tried something when the teacher left for a moment. He went over to our teacher's aquarium, which had a lot of tropical fish and were fun to look at, and took out a smaller fish with his fingers. He brought it over to us and said, "Look at this." He proceeded to swallow the fish, and then he left with a smile. He was not allowed back into the club and had later left school into a behavioral program. Story 4. We had a kid who refused to write with a pencil or pen. He was able to, he just refused. He had a portable electronic typewriter that he would carry between classes all day, every day. He had some mental issues, obviously, but nobody really knew what his deal was. He got transferred to a special school after 9th grade. I tutored him for science once. He seemed fine. He understood the material. Story 5. He would howl like a dog. He'd get in trouble daily and get under the table panting and bark and growl. One day was an extra bad episode, and we all thought it was funny being 5 years old at the time, and after that day we didn't see him anymore. The state took him. Turns out he was kept in cages with the dogs at his house and learned dog behavior. Wonder whatever happened to him. Hope he got help. Story 6. It wasn't all on him, but we had a guy named Cody who decided to shave his head one day, then few days later he pretended to fall asleep in class and let someone draw on the back of his head. They drew a Hitler face, I believe. Then got really mad about it and came in the next day and posted a hit list on his locker and got suspended. I was friends with him up until shortly before that episode. He started getting really weird. I hope he's okay, whatever happens in the end. Story 7. In high school, it was mandatory that you had to shower after phys ed unless it was your last class of the day. Freshman year, my locker was in the same section with a chronic masturbator. Almost every day, he would get so horny during the class that he would run to the locker room, strip off his clothes, and jerk off into an empty locker. Then he would grab his towel, run into the shower, and be back in minutes. It was very strange. I hope the guys were checking the lower lockers before putting their stuff in there. Story 8. He was in my 7th grade science class. Our teacher was a young woman, 27 years old at the time and hot. During the sex ed portion of the year, in life science, he asked if she'd take her shirt and bra off to show us how to breastfeed. That was an instant trip to in-school suspension. However, it did not end there. Somehow, and I don't know how, he ended up in school suspension and ended up having to hang around the school vice principal all day. He was the only one we ever saw manage to score the level lower than in school suspension. Story 9. The weird guy at my middle school smelled like horrifically bad. I don't even remember his real name, but we called him Jock, as in jockstrap. He was odd, and retroactively, thinking back, he was probably on the spectrum. He wasn't a bad guy, he was just smelly. Nobody really associated with him much, but when we were in 6th grade, 9/11 happened on a Tuesday, and I had a friend in math who was freaking out. His dad was flying from Vegas to Los Angeles, and with the attacks and no instant communication, he couldn't talk to his dad. Jock sat with my friend and reassured him for the hours we were at school. Nobody had any idea what was happening, but he just assured him that his dad was fine. Turned out his flight was grounded, the dad was fine. Jock was a little hero and a reassuring presence on that day for my friend. Story 10. Got drunk off of Southern Comfort he brought in a Coke bottle, got on top of our American government teacher's desk, went screw school, whipped out his dick, and took a leak all over the assignments we turned in. That's not the only thing he did. He had the Secret Service visit his house. This was when Doobie was president during his first term. He screamed, in the middle of the quad, during lunch break, that he was going to harm the president, not in those words. The Secret Service visited his house, asked him a series of questions, and told him that because he was a minor, that they were gonna keep a file on him. Last I heard about him, he dropped out of high school and moved with his girlfriend to Chicago. He started a band. That was 2004-2005. Not sure what happened to him. Hope he's doing okay. Story 11. My brother's friend got caught by the principal jerking off into a Yoo-hoo bottle in the bathroom. He got suspended. When he came back to school, he had a yellow Yoo-hoo shirt with a red dotted line at his waist that read, "Do not shake below this line." The principal didn't find that funny. Story 12. He wore these baggy, crusty sweatpants, and we were pretty sure he went commando under them. Anyways, he'd masturbate under the desk with his hand in his pocket and walk around with visibly wet marks on the crusty sweats like nothing happened. Weird kid. Sells used cars now, which feels weirdly fitting. Story 13. I have known this girl since pre-K. In kindergarten, she peed in a mug and tried to give it to our teacher saying it was tea. In 5th grade, she put itching powder in a bottle of lotion and gave it to girls she hated. She dropped out of high school to run away and become a stripper. She actually seemed to be successful, cause then she opened up a weed shop right after it got legalized in the state we're from. The last ones aren't all that weird, I'm just reflecting on this woman's life. LMAO. Story 14. When I was in 1st grade, there was this awkward girl I sat near in the classroom. She's so shy that even when she needs to pee so bad, she can't speak up. I was her only friend, and a few months passed, she started bringing a potato with her daily at school. It's just a raw potato, and she talked to it. I never really mind since I thought she's just playing. Later, before that school year ends, she brought a potato peeler to school and started peeling the potato and poked it with her pencil. It was so sudden that I felt a bit shocked, but didn't really mind it later on. She ended up transferring and never saw her again. Now that I think about it, it could have been something dangerous. It was definitely a weird experience. Story 15. He was a Logan Paul, fratty, YouTuber wannabe, except he didn't film anything. He'd try to get locked into grocery stores, the schools, and churches and spend the night. He and his buddy would play drinking games. Instead of drinking a shot, they would tase each other. He tried to cart a full grill into school so he and his buddies could tailgate at the cafeteria. He got into trouble with the law at the very end of sophomore year and got barred from running for student government his junior year. This is important because he was class president sophomore year, and then, after the ban, won class president senior year. This is the guy in charge of my class reunion. I probably will not have a class reunion. Either he's gonna screw it up and not plan it, or since I'm somewhat disconnected from the people and hometown I went to school, he's gonna screw up inviting everyone and I won't know what's happening. What made the popular kid at school the unpopular kid? Story 1. My partner likes to tell the story of how she became the unpopular kid at school. She was about 6'7", so primary 2 here in the UK, and a trend kicked off in her class of eating dog biscuits. All the kids were stealing dog biscuits from home and eating them at break time. Unfortunately, she didn't have a dog and just had to eat normal human biscuits at school. She was ostracized every break time for it. Peer pressure is weird sometimes. Story 2. One of the kids at our school lived with his grandma because his parents died. Crap, and a group of his mates started harassing the old lady whenever she came to pick him up. Principal was reported and they ended up getting expelled altogether. Story 3. There was one kid in my class who was the son of our math teacher. He was crazy popular because he was able to help everyone out with their homework for that class. Turns out he was actually snooping through his dad's notes to get the answers. The teacher naturally got super suspicious after a while, so he deliberately made a fake answer sheet. Of course, the kid grabbed it and noted it all down. It was full of wrong answers, so blatant that anyone who even slightly paid attention in class would know they were way off base. The kid handed out the answers anyway, and in an instant made about half the class bomb, and his popularity dropped like a rock as they all accused him of deliberately making them fail. They moved him to another class and they never had an incident of cheating again. Story 4. Guy wasn't necessarily the popular kid, but it wasn't a big school, so everyone knew everyone. I think between 9th and 10th grade he was found alone in his car behind the local arcade beating off. He was called Thumper from that day forward. No idea what happened after graduation, but he has to have some bad memories of those years. Story 5. This guy at my table would play the "no one likes me, I'm the center of attention now" card. As in, he would fake sadness for attention, redirecting conversation and drawing the energy from a room. Like the kid who won't be friends with you anymore because you wore the same color shirt. He was quite wealthy too and would rub it in your face. Story 6. He didn't exactly become unpopular, but my high school star quarterback recorded a video of himself fingering his butt and he sent it to a girl in a neighboring school district. The video got passed around there and made its way back into our school and he got a social vibe checked. But he didn't really lose his popularity, it just sort of lessened and he actually became a way better person after the fact. He still never learned that you can't throw bullets when playing indoor football in gym class against non-football players though. Story 7. I stood up for the teacher with, at the time, terminal cancer when everyone was teasing/bullying her. Cancer made her a bit more positive, live life to fullest why, and she was pretty childish, actually great for elementary school children, but my class was 1 degree away from feral at the time. I was no longer popular. She was super nice and by some miracle beat the cancer. Story 8. When she made fun of me in front of everyone for wearing a yellow shirt to school. It was just a plain yellow shirt and she somehow found a way to mock the color. It was so unnecessary and made her look like someone who was just rude for no reason. Everyone quickly realized that she thought people were automatically on her side because she was somewhat rich, and she just became a joke after that. Story 9. I went to an all-girls school and there was an all-boys school about 5 minutes walk away. When I was in my final year, the school vice captain of the boys' school was dating one of our grade leaders. Both being 17 and not very smart, she eventually got pregnant. She dropped out, and pretty much everyone who knew him at our school hated him. Prior to that, he was very well liked. I thought it was a bit ridiculous. Pretty sure it takes 2 to tango. Story 10. There was a really pretty girl that was quite popular in my high school. She was a bit snobby to people and sorta rude. I recall one time she threw a textbook at my groin because I was leaning back in my desk and thought it was funny. I guess it kinda was thinking back. She also liked to make fun of the fact that I was Mexican on more than one occasion. Anyways, she gained significant weight our junior/senior year in high school, and I guess a lot of the popular kids decided to disown her for it. I never actually heard anything, but I recall her sitting all alone at lunch one day. Not my best moment, but I walked by her, pointed, and plainly said, "You earned this." Story 11. A popular guy in my year pissed himself during an exam in our gym hall. Unfortunately for him, the biggest crap in our year was sitting directly behind him. He immediately stood up and yelled, "Pissed himself." He proceeded to get teary-eyed and say, "It's my energy drink." It spilled over and over before the exam supervisor literally dragged him out of the hall. 2 weeks later, he returned to school the unpopular kid and kept a low profile for a while until it eventually died down and he climbed the social ranks once more. That is until an episode of The In-Betweeners, a popular TV show in the UK, aired in which one of the main characters crap himself in the exam hall, and it reminded everyone of what happened, effectively nuking his popularity all over again. Story 12. A mom got into an argument with a parish priest and forced her daughter to lie to the police about him molesting her when she was an altar girl, all over some memorial that the mother didn't agree with. The plan worked since the local archdiocese was forced to transfer him to another parish, but it was quickly proven the girl was being forced to lie by the police. The girl's reputation didn't take that much of a hit during school, but her mom became a social pariah across multiple parishes since the priest was a patron to the local high school and a lot of people respected him. The girl was seriously screwed. However, her parents wanted her to become a solicitor or barrister, and I think they made her take law in A-level, but since the mom made her lie to the police, she's a documented liar, which bars her from enrolling into a legal course in the UK. Story 13. She got pregnant at 17, and the father could have been one of two guys, both of whom were boyfriends of her close friends, and neither of whom wanted anything more to do with her. My school actually had a really good education, and we knew about contraception from the age of about 11, plus this was the UK where contraception is free and easy to get, so she couldn't blame ignorance or lack of resources. She tried for the Woe Is Me Act, and nobody wanted to be around her anymore. Story 14. My grade school most popular kid was a fat-ass bully that only was popular because people feared him and so they wanted to please him. He bullied me for 6 years. Then we got to middle school and their people started to bully him for his weight and looks. I will never forget the day, years after grade school, when I ran into him again and he was a friendless, depressed mess that begged if he could hang out with me. My God, what was it satisfying to just laugh at him and walk away. Still, it has been over a decade and truly hope his life and personality turned out for the better. Story 15. I hated this kid, but apparently the rest of the school loved him. He was freshman class president and legit looked and acted like a politician even at 18. This is college. Then he got drunk and ran over two girls walking back from a party, and to ice the cake he stopped and called the cops himself, but then started fighting the EMTs when they arrived. Somehow he only did 2 years and came back to school. His family had a lot of money. But we all knew by then how it went down. He was not well received when he returned to campus. I don't think he has a future in politics. Think he even ended up transferring schools because even the professors hated him when he came back. What's the worst thing you heard a young kid say without them knowing what it means? Story 1. Daycare teacher. I asked a little girl, 5, how her morning was going so far. She said it went good, but she had to wake up early because her cat had a doctor appointment. I tell her that it's important for cats to go to the doctor because it keeps them happy and healthy. She very casually goes, "Yeah, but they cut his balls off." Was fighting for my life not to bust out laughing. Story 2. My mother always muttered balls when something went wrong. So when I was in kindergarten and I broke my shoelace, trying to tie it, I hollered balls. I had to sit in the corner and teacher called my mother. Mom wasn't really upset because she knew where I heard it, but I still felt confused. Later, I heard her telling my aunt and they giggled. Story 3. I was a young kid. I thought Mr. P was another word for everyone's private part because I saw a man in a movie accident glue his hand to a statue's crotch. He said something about his hand being glued to the statue's Mr. P. So a week later my parents are driving me and my sister somewhere. We are talking, I don't remember what about, but I yelled at my mom, "I came out of your penis." Dad almost crashed the car from laughing too hard. Story 4. This one, actually was me in middle school. I saw my teacher was flashing finger guns at some of the other kids, and I asked him why he was, and I quote, finger banging kids instead of playing Foursquare. Sorry, Mr. V. I, now being an adult, realized my horrible messed up. It haunts me whenever I think of finger guns. This was roughly 15 years ago. Story 5. This is something I actually said. My father used to be a screenwriter, nothing you've heard of or want to hear of, I assure you. His movies were all rated R. I attended a private Christian school for 2 years while in single digits, and I told my teacher once that my dad made adult films, because rated R means for adults only, and I had never heard of porn. The school actually called my parents to ask what I was talking about, and my mother had to explain I didn't mean that. It's probably not the worst thing a child has ever said, but I wouldn't have phrased it that way if I'd known what adult films implies. I look back on it and laugh now. Story 6. My nephew has autism. When he was about 6 years old, my grandpa died. At the funeral, he walked up to my aunt, who had also just lost her husband about 6 weeks prior, and said, "So Uncle John is dead. He won't be here because he's dead, just very matter of fact," and then went and sat down. My aunt was in tears, but my nephew had no idea what he said was hurtful in any way. It was innocent, as he was just beginning to process the idea of death himself, so he just said it out loud without a second thought. Story 7. I was 5 years old at a Chinese food restaurant with my parents. I wanted to be a big boy and order for myself, so I asked for an order of Negroes as opposed to egg rolls. The waiter started laughing and asked if I'd rather have egg rolls. I replied, sure. Break my arm as opposed to twist my arm. My parents were happy to bring this up many times in the years that followed. The 80s were weird. Story 8. A song in a football stadium, translated in English. My father was with the Gestapo, my mother with the SS. Together they burned Jews, because Jews burn the best. It's a song made by hooligans against Ajax Amsterdam. They call themselves the Jews, so hooligans from other clubs make songs referring to the Second World War in order to shock and mock the hooligans of Ajax. These songs are also sung by very little children in the stadiums because they think it's normal. Story 9. My then almost 2-year-old daughter started singing quite loudly in the middle of the store, Daddy Finger, blah blah, instead of Where Are You? A lot of people looked at me in shock. Thankfully, one guy looked over and said, "My kids love that song," and began singing it with the actual words. That man is my hero. Another time, when my daughter was around 4 and we were hosting a dinner party, she tapped her glass and announced that all the good girls would be rewarded with melatonin ice cream. She meant Neapolitan ice cream. Also, being a good girl is not required of guests to get ice cream. Story 10. One time when I was younger, my brother thought it would be a good idea to put a bag over my head like kidnappers in those movies, so I loudly exclaimed, "Are you teabagging me?" Because I genuinely thought that was the word for it, and my brother, who was clearly disturbed, just said, no. That's not what that means, and walked off. I was confused at his reaction and searched it up later and never felt more humiliated in my life. I think I was like 8 years old and he was about 13, maybe. Story 11. My stepdaughter and I have a nightly routine, which is to take down half an hour before bedtime, and then we spend 30 minutes just shooting the crap, and then at bedtime we have a cuddle, bump foreheads, and then she kisses my forehead. I have no idea how it started, but we've been doing it for about 5 years now. A couple of years ago, about 10 at the time, we were so engrossed in conversation that we ran over to bedtime, and as I was rushing her to go to bed, she stopped and shouted, "Wait, I haven't given you head yet." She'd named this routine head, but had never verbalized that before. Cue an awkward conversation about how we have to call the routine something else, because that means something else in the adult world. It's now just called forehead bump, and yes, I will keep doing it every night until she no longer wants to. Story 12. The little sister of a kid I was tutoring was maybe 4 or 5 years old at the time. She told me, with a really sad voice and zero context, "Luna is dying next week." After the initial shock, it turned out that what she meant was that her favorite show, Soy Luna, was going to be taken off of Netflix. Story 13. Oh, I have one. At my boss wedding, this 5-year-old kid of one of my colleagues overheard my friend jokingly telling me he was going to tongue punch my fart box. He laughed. We tried to shush him, and this encouraged him to climb on a trampoline and bounce around screaming tongue punch my fart box. Coworker and his wife are devout witnesses, so it didn't go down too well, but you try keeping a straight face after a bottle of wine. Story 14. Halloween. Trick or treating with the boy. Some neighbor blocks over has turned their Cape Cod house into some kind of monster face, and as we approach, there are red streamers and fangs at the doorway like the whole house is going to chew up the neighborhood. Lights flashing, candy bowl visible inside the porch. The owner wanders up in a sexy vamp/Booberella Elvira getup. She says ask the house if you want candy or a trick. He, 8 years old male, looks up and says, "Can I come in your mouth?" Story 15. My son was in grade 2 and came home in a huff. He was mad and said, "You won't believe what happened to Amber today. She was jerking guys off and got punched in the face." I stared at him for a second, looked at my mom who was equally baffled, and asked him to please explain. FYI, Amber is in a different grade 2 class and she and my son do not get along. He tried again. Amber was jerking off Logan, Max, and Tim punched her in the face. I sighed and said, what exactly was she saying or doing to them? At this point, my dad weighed in with, what is going on at that school, and my mom was laughing so hard she couldn't speak. She called Tim and Max names and was being a jerk. You know, jerking them off. He looked so annoyed that we didn't get it at first. I had to explain that it's either breaking off or being a jerk. What's a local rumor you heard as a kid that turned out to be true years later? Story 1. This is a little more lighthearted. But when I was in elementary school, probably like 3rd grade, all the kids in my class would joke about how our primary teacher and our Spanish teacher liked each other. We were all little kids, so of course it was just dumb little kids joking around. That is, until a few years later when I was in middle school and I found out my old teacher and Spanish teacher recently got married. Story 2. Always heard rumors that this kid who I rode BMX with, his dad was a high-ranking member of the Down. One day we were over there, years later, chatting crap around the fire in his backyard, and about 70 patched members arrived at the house for a meeting. They bought us a crap of beer and told us to find a park to drink it in for a few hours while they had their meeting. Story 3. We had a rumor about there being a white horse in the woods behind the movie theater in our town. There were a couple homeless people living there though, so no one went and checked it out. Well, before seeing a movie one day, me and a couple of friends decided to make the trek. We stumbled past the makeshift camp and found a small path that led to a fence. We stood there for a couple seconds, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, a majestic white steed came trotting towards us. We snapped a quick pic on an early 2000 cell phone of our friend and the horse and got the out of there. The pic looked absolutely fake, and no one believes us about it to this day. Story 4. Rumor about a local businessman who tried to end it all and was rescued. Some weeks later, he ran into a burning building and rescued 2 young children, sustaining severe burns in the process. A few months ago, I saw him in the pub on the green. All of the skin in his face and hands had melted and he had skin grafted everywhere. Happiest man in the pub. What a hero. Story 5. The park we used to play football at used to be a cemetery. They exhumed all the coffins and moved them years before I was born. We'd freak each other out, especially at night, saying there were still bodies buried there. One day we were playing and they were doing some groundskeeping work and they found a coffin. The state came out and found 30 more. We were actually playing on top of hallowed ground. Story 6. It was a local urban legend that this huge, old, and abandoned house was haunted because like a century ago there was an incident there. Kids would freak each other out over it, tell ghost stories, sneak onto the property, whatever. I thought it was just that, an urban legend about an abandoned house. Nope, in the early 1900s the husband and wife were found dead in the house. It was never solved, but the son was suspected because he was missing and never found. No one moved into it after that and it sat empty since. I only found out because they planned to tear it down to build apartments on the property 2 years ago, but the local community rallied to preserve it. Story 7. A teacher at my high school was fired, and the rumor was that it was because he was in a relationship with a former student. Turned out to be true, but the school fired him for marrying a former student, despite the fact that she was his student during his first year of teaching in the 70s, when she was 17 and he was 25, and they met again for the first time and dated 30 years later when she was 47 and he was 55. Didn't matter. School accused him of grooming a student, fired him, and tried to have criminal charges pressed against him. Story 8. Everyone at my school knew someone who told them that this one house just down the road from the school was owned by a locally known drug dealer and it was his emergency hideout house. Years later, I was driving past and laughed at how ridiculous the story was. 2 weeks after that, the house was on the news with armed police surrounding it. Turns out it really was this drug hideout, and the guy was involved in way more stuff than just that. They found drugs, weapons, and evidence of a human trafficking ring in there. The house got mysteriously burned down while his court case was going on and has been a burned out empty lot ever since. Story 9. Okay, so this wasn't one that I heard as a kid, but there was a rumor around the college my wife works at that the chemistry professor was actually the father of the literature professor's baby. A couple of the students asked her about it, and she admitted that yes, the father was the chemistry professor. The students were scandalized, until she explained to them that the chemistry professor was her husband and this would be their second kid. Apparently, it never occurred to the kids at this small Midwestern college that couples didn't always share a last name. Story 10. I grew up where there were some signs of Native Americans. I started believing that this one particularly beautiful spot had to be sacred and probably was a burial ground. I'd convince my friends to hold hands in a circle and try to commune with the dead. After I got a bit older, I was super embarrassed that I'd ever done such things. A few years later, a Native American came but told us how sacred the land was that we owned and asked permission to hold peyote rituals with his tribe and others on our land. To this day, they still come out and set up a teepee and drum all night, absolutely flying on hallucinogens. Turns out I was right. Story 11. There's a very small, blink if you miss it haunted bridge in my small town called George's Bridge. The rumor was it is called George's Bridge because a guy named George slept with his sister, got her pregnant, and then hung himself off that bridge with a barbed wire noose. Turns out the only part that isn't true is that it's haunted. The rest of the story was confirmed to us in high school because several of our teachers were classmates with George. Most of us assumed it was just an urban legend up until that point. Story 12. There was a Quiznos here that had the worst service and worst food ever. Like you'd go in and there'd be 3 people working there, but they'd just be sitting down watching TV. When you went up to the counter, they'd sigh and slowly go back there and proceed to make the worst sandwich you've ever had. All the employees were Haitian and they almost exclusively spoke Creole in the store. We all joked that it must be a drug front because they did everything they could do to make people not want to come back. Well, turns out it was. They were selling huge amounts of pills out of the back and laundering money through the Quiznos. Story 13. There was an urban legend about a ghost that would walk along the road at night who didn't have a face. He was called the Green Man because apparently he died of electrocution and his skin turned to a shade of green. Teenagers around me would drive around at night trying to find him. I never heard of anyone claiming they did. Turns out the story is true, but he was a real alive person who had a malformed face from climbing an electric line as a kid. He would take walks along the road at night because he didn't want to scare people with his face during the day. Apparently, he was a friendly guy and even would enjoy beers and smokes with teenagers that managed to find him. Story 14. That our math teacher was dating the photography teacher and the English teacher. All 3 denied they were dating. Turned out to be 100% true, and word broke right before I graduated. Both the English teacher and photography teacher dismissed the rumors about the math teacher dating the other as just rumors, and even appreciated as a cover for their own relationship. Then I guess they finally talked to each other about it and realized, wait, he is dating both of us? So, that was some drama to cap off my high school experience. Story 15. Our school was a convent run by a Catholic missionary. Some boys in ninth grade were punished and temporarily suspended for spreading a rumor that one of the nuns involved in running our school was seen socializing with a teacher who was a non-Catholic outside of school. For those of you who aren't aware, Catholic nuns are sworn to a life of celibacy. Well, it's been almost 15 years since I graduated high school, and I just found out they're happily married. Turns out those poor boys were punished unjustly. What was the best thing the quiet kid has said or done in class? Story 1. There was a guy named Phil in my high school psychology class who had pretty severe Asperger's. People were often mean to him because high school, but I genuinely liked him. And while he was very quiet, when he did speak, I thought he was hilarious. One day my teacher was jokingly giving me crap about protecting my sensitive information. I yelled out my social security number extremely quickly, almost in gibberish. Phil repeated it back verbatim and told me he was going to steal my identity. Then he put his cape on and ran out of the classroom. I hope Phil is doing well these days. He was awesome. Story 2. I was best friends with the quiet kid in high school. He spoke to me almost exclusively and quietly enough that others rarely noticed. One day, the loud girl noticed. "Oh my God, he talks? I haven't heard you talk since 6th grade." Without looking at her, he leans in real close and whispers something to me. He says he only talks to interesting people. I'll always remember this, partly for the ego boost he gave me, but also because of her reaction. "Screw you. I hope I don't hear you for another 4 years." Story 3. Korean kid in Canada, socially awkward, did not speak English very well, physically not coordinated playing any sport, even running. That was until we were on a field trip and at lunch we went to a place with Dance Revolution. It was like the videos, playing on both pads, hands on railings, blasting the game to oblivion, setting high scores only to beat them. He had the entire leaderboard before we left. First time I saw him smile. One of the most impressive things I have ever seen. Story 4. My friend decided he hated the quiet/weird kid. He wasn't super quiet, but he didn't have any friends. One day my friend kept throwing those tiny Chips Ahoy cookies at the back of the quiet kid's head who was sitting by himself at lunch. Quiet kid picked up one of the cookies, stood over my sitting friend, and smashed the crap out of that cookie on my friend's head. It was amazing. Edit, for those asking if we're still friends or why I was friends with someone like that. It was the first time my friend was being this way. It was off-putting to several people, and no, we aren't really friends anymore. Story 5. Not in school, but I teach middle to high school kids, 13 to 17, how to umpire baseball games. There was one kid, 13 years old, who was very quiet, reserved and shy, and I thought, this is not the vocation for him. A week later I swing by the field to evaluate him and see if I can help him with anything. I arrived about 5 minutes after the game started and I could hear loud, confident and definitive calls coming from this kid. I was floored. His mom came up to me and said that becoming an umpire has completely changed his personality. Story 6. The quiet kid in my class was sort of bullied by this kid who had a cleft chin. One day the cleft chin guy insulted the quiet kid, and the quiet kid came back with the insult, "Is your mouth so filthy because someone messed you in the chin?" It was 6th grade and the whole table, we were seated as groups, busted out laughing. It was a dirty joke, so check, and it was aimed at a bully, double check. He became known as the Chin Kid, which was hilarious to us 6th graders. Story 7. Professor was talking about the personalities of different cities and says something like, some cities have a lot of personality and talk a lot, some cities whisper, and some cities don't seem to be saying anything at all. At which point this quiet kid who had never uttered a word says, almost under his breath, Topeka. That was all. Kid had some feelings about Topeka, Kansas. Story 8. Sorry if this is anticlimactic. It was something that was a lot better if you went through it, haha. There was a quiet kid in my class and he always got up 5 minutes before class ended every day, like to the exact second. One day he got up 20 minutes before class and I crap you not, the whole class gasped. When the teacher asked him where he was going, he responded, I need to go check my blood sugar a little earlier today because I'm going home early to visit Disney. Kid was so quiet, no one even knew he was diabetic. He didn't mention it ever. Story 9. I'm friends with one of those kids that's so quiet, it's like he can turn invisible. People just forget he's there. I was in art class and the stereotypical problem girl of our grade, let's call her Jane, starts crap about stupid crap no one cares about. Just being a crap person overall. I had one earbud in and was just tuning her out when the quiet kid suddenly looks up and says, "You know that no one cares about what you're talking about, right? No one's listening to you." The entire class was silent. I've been friends with him ever since. Story 10. I was the quiet kid in my grade. My gym teacher always liked me because I was a good athlete, but he was very against swearing. I would stand near the girls who would bully me and yell out swear words when he wasn't looking, and he'd always assume it wasn't me. As punishment, he would make the girls do 10 push-ups per swear word. Small victories like that got me through high school. Story 11. I used to be the quiet kid who didn't say much in class. I was also known as the one girl who was pretty good at drawing. I don't know if this would be considered the best thing I ever did, but I do remember something I am somewhat proud of. For my 11th grade English class, we read through Shakespeare's Macbeth, and the project for that module was a creative project that incorporated the themes of the play. 2 of those themes were internal/external and torture for some reason. We had to present our projects to the class. So, my 11th grade self decided to take all the characters in Macbeth and draw them as tortured spirits, connected to a specific medieval torture method. So, Macbeth was drawn with a prisoner's collar, a device that was used to prevent sleep just like he was deprived of in the play. Banquo was drawn with a heretic's fork, a device that was used to prevent a person from talking, just like how Banquo was killed in order to guarantee his silence, etc., etc. I got an A+ on that project, but the presentation of it to the class certainly earned me a few stares. Whoops. Story 12. I am that quiet kid. I've told this story before, but not to Reddit. I always wear this big pair of headphones, and one day I was just letting YouTube autoplay music. It turned to Pumped Up Kicks. I don't listen to the song, but the autoplay had gone to Stranger Places. I decided I didn't want to listen and tried to grab my phone out of my pocket to change it. The cord snagged and was ripped out as the phone fell. For whatever reason, the song played out loud now, as it does sometimes, but it stopped after 2 seconds. I grabbed the phone and everyone was now staring at me. I, the quiet girl wearing mostly black including a hoodie and headphones, was listening to Pumped Up Kicks in their eyes. People were really friendly for a few days after, and I didn't realize why for some time. Story 13. I was the quiet kid through most of school as I moved around a lot. In 8th grade, I think in my class was playing a game where if you answered the teacher's question right, you get to ask him anything you wanted. There was a girl in my class named Kelsey who everyone knew slept around. Kelsey and her friend were spraying me with a water bottle and thought it was hilarious. I was fed up with it by the time it was my turn to answer the question. I answered the question correctly, and so in front of the whole class I asked my teacher, out of numbers 1 to 100, which one of Kelsey's boyfriends gave her syphilis. The teacher just stared at me as the class left, and she got up and walked out. I got 3 days on the islands for it. Story 14. I was the quiet kid, and once 3 girls in my oceanography class did a presentation and kept saying octopuses, which technically is correct, but the unnecessary or incorrect ES that people put after words making it longer bothers me, and trust me, I didn't want these girls standing there all day, but besides the point. I correct them and say it's octopi in this quiet classroom, and everyone looks to the person sitting next to me and think it was her. It became a running thing in Ocean that they would tell her. To this day, no one knows I was the one that said that. Story 15. One time in class, my teacher mentions the unlimited possibilities of women and how women can do anything men can do, and my quiet friend whispers to me women can't be sperm donors. It was silent, so the whole classroom heard it, and they talk to this day about it. Forgot to mention that they laughed.